you like my outfit? I just picked it up in by the Barclays Center in Brooklyn yesterday. So I have never been in a burqa before, but a lot of my family wears this kind of outfit in Karachi, in Pakistan. It's really hard to eat in this thing. I tell you, it's hard to, and when you get thirsty, it's really hard to drink. I discovered that when I was walking around yesterday in this outfit. So I decided to do a little experiment and walk around in a burqa yesterday. You know, walk around Brooklyn, walk around the city, and just see how the world related to me as a traditional, very religious Muslim. And it was very interesting. Very interesting. Some people, you know, if I would ask them directions. Excuse me, do you know how to get to the G train? And sometimes they would sort of back up, and then sometimes they'd be like, oh yeah, sure, straight, just go straight down there. It's just 2 blocks. Oh, you mean, yeah, it's just 2 blocks. Yeah, just go to the corner and then make a left. Yep, and then just go 1 more block. And they were very, very nice. I also played a few practical jokes. So I said sometimes I'd call them over and I'd say, excuse me, can I ask you something? Do you know where I can get a big black dildo? Or I'd say, excuse me, do you know where the closest sex shop is? I just wanted to get a rise, see how they'd react, you know, did they have a sense of humor when it came to a woman who might be dressed as a terrorist, someone who might be associated with Jihad, you know, a freedom fighter. Hang on a second. Forgot my pocketbook. Okay. So sometimes I would I'd pull this joke out and I'd say, I will kill you! I will kill you, infidel. I have weapons of mass destruction. Like this! But, and I do. This can be a weapon of mass destruction. This is like a 9-inch cock, okay? But luckily, I only use it on myself. All my weapons of mass destruction I've always just detonated myself. That's actually been the issue. So anyway, the experiment's over. I'm gonna take this thing off. Whew, that feels better, more air. Oh, God, it's hot in these things. I tell you, I don't know how we want to do it. You know, I was a stripper, a Muslim stripper actually, and I never told anyone that I was Muslim. I actually didn't even know that I was Muslim because my mom never really talked about it. She never, I mean, I had no idea I was Muslim, I think until I went to India when I was about 19, and all of my relatives were wearing more cash outfits like that. You know, they had the hijab, you know, covering, and I have a family of Ismaili Muslims. I'm still not really clear what that is, but it's some sort of sect of Muslim, and they're kind of really religious. They're very much like, they do the Quran 5 times a day, you know, they're praying, and, you know, like, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen like the in the street, I mean, it's actually really amazing. I'm actually really impressed with how committed Muslims are. They seem to really be very, like, they walk their walk and they talk their talk. You know, they don't, I've seen with other religions a lot of hypocrisy in my life. So I didn't know that, you know, I didn't know we were Muslim until I was like about 19. And so anyway, I went to India. My grandfather, you know, I went to go basically, you know, go and see what I had inherited. So I get to this beautiful mansion on the Arabian Sea in Mumbai, which used to be Bombay. And the house was completely, it was gorgeous. I mean, it was a three bedrooms overlooking the Arabian Sea. Nothing across from it, just the sea. And there were these balconies, and you could hear the hustle and bustle in the street. And I saw this bedroom where my mother slept as a girl, you know, and it was very emotional, like, to see, because my mother never talked to her about her background. And I was standing in a room that used to be my real grandmother's, you know, that I never knew my real grandmother. And but I felt very connected to her energy, because I had heard these stories from my family that lived next door. Because we owned two flats we owned, basically, there were two apartments on each floor, and there's only like 3 floors, and the 2 floors were joined. There was 2 apartments that, like, sort of were right next to each other, so they were my first cousins. So I walked into this apartment, and I was like just totally blown away. I mean, it was like I couldn't believe that I inherited this apartment, because, you know, I came from such poverty. My mom is a hoarder. She lives in Jamaica, Queens, where we all lived essentially in a landfill with garbage that had, you know, and it was a pretty crazy way to grow up. I mean, if you've ever seen, they have this show, Hoarders, on TV here. But if you haven't seen the show, it's basically, just picture a landfill, like a garbage landfill. That's what our living room looked like. So there was one room where 3 of us lived, 3 out of 4. It was me. My mother lived in a queen size mattress on the floor. My little brother, who's now a famous actor, lived on a cot, and I lived on another cot, and then there was like this window that overlooked the street. And my older brother, so I have one brother who's famous, one brother who's infamous. My infamous brother lived in the bedroom, and, you know, you could just hear the Rush music. He was like into Rush and rock and roll and whatever. A typical day in my house might have been, my younger brother might have been shitting in a newspaper. Okay, so let's just backtrack. So how did this hoarding start? We were born upstate New York, where my dad headed the anthropology department at Syracuse University. My parents had met at Oxford in England, studying anthropology, and they got married, and it was a big deal, because my father had to ask for permission to marry my mother, because the British service, you know, he worked for the British service, and you couldn't just marry whoever you wanted, kind of like in India. And so he asked permission, and they didn't actually give it to him, is what I understand from third-party knowledge, because my parents, you know, never told me anything. So everything I've always learned through a puzzle, which is interesting, because my grandfather always loved puzzles. My Indian Muslim grandfather, he loved puzzles. He would, whenever we would buy him a gift, we'd always buy him a puzzle with like 1,000 pieces, and he would always put them together. And those are really tough to do, you know, because you have all the sand, like we'd get by the Sahara, and you'd have to take the beige ones and put them together, and it's like really hard to match, you know, the pieces, and yeah, he'd do it. And then he'd hang them it was really cute, he would hang them on the walls as artwork. And I don't know how he ended up with this. Oh, I do know. I remember someone told me. So my grandfather, my real grandmother in India, she was OCD, and she used to wash her hands for hours at a time until they cracked. And in fact, I heard a story that for my mother's wedding, because she would wash her hands for so many hours, that they had to tell her that the wedding was like at 6, the flight was at 6 o'clock. They had to tell her that it was 5 o'clock at 10 in the morning, so she would wash her hands for the hours and still make the flight. She used to move so slowly that there was a story that she once, like the subway door, when it goes bing, bing, you know, it literally closed on her head. She was that slow, you know, the opposite of me. She wore diamonds, you know, like a lot of jewels, like she always had jewelry, even when she was just going to the market, you know. And I guess the saddest thing that I heard about her was that when she died, she took all of her jewels. She died alone because she couldn't let anyone in. She didn't trust anyone. I don't know why the servant wasn't there, because that's what, you know, wealthy families do. They have servants, and I heard that when they found her, that she was lying on the floor, and they found all these newspapers around her, and she had wrapped the diamonds for safekeeping, you know, sort of like my mother, like a hoarded, you know, like the hoarding was like sort of generational. It was like this whole thing of holding on, and so I never got to know her, and I did get to know my grandfather, and I'm so grateful for that, because he was the only man in my life. It's not that my father wasn't died or anything, and he's alive. He's just on wife number 5 somewhere in Europe. And so he cheated on my mom with a grad student, and my mom was a virgin when she met my dad, so she was completely destroyed. She was mistaken for Miss World at the time. She was really, a lot of Miss Worlds and Miss Universes, they're from India. And so you sort of have this, you know, you sort of have the Miss World meets MI6, you know, like James Bond sort of type, and they have 3 good-looking kids, and then he cheated on my mom. And my mom said, according to the story, again, this is all hearsay, but the story is that my mom said, well, fine, you know, I'm going to take your kids. That's his version. And so she took us to England, and there was I grew up hearing that, you know, I grew up having my mom show me, you know, well, you know, your father doesn't want you. Look, it's postmarked. I mean, if he knew where you were, you know. But I thought otherwise, you know. I went into this deep fantasy life, and I would say my first fantasy was that my father actually didn't know where I was. So I'm a really good stalker. So I stalked him. I stalked my father, and it's pretty hard to track down MI6, okay? But I did, and I got him on the phone, and I was 8 years old, and I was like, I said, Dad. I spoke with a British accent because I lived there for 8 years, and I said, Dad, and he's like, Siobhan, I'm in a meeting. I'm going to have to call you back. And I got a letter subsequent to that, and the letter was typewritten, single-spaced, very formal, with the address Tanzania. He's an anthropologist who lived there, and it said, Dear Siobhan, colon is a business letter. You know, I didn't even get the comma. I wouldn't recognize you in the street if I saw you. I do not consider you a Cochrane. Your family you would not recognize either. However, feeling somewhat, you know, it just always seemed so surprising that your mother would choose a place like New York City to raise. It's a place that she never really liked anyway. Most unusual. However, feeling somewhat sympathetic to your cause, your plight, I shall offer you the following very generous offer. A, should you choose to attend Trinity at Dublin, as I did, and study economics, or business of some sort, I shall match dollar for dollar 25% of your tuition. B, if you should attend Outward Bound, as I did as a lad, I shall match 25%, and you may share this offer with your brother, your siblings. Love, F. love F. So, well, it didn't feel very loving. It was actually just so painful to be rejected in black and white. And so I discovered that a way that I could avoid pain was with sticking objects in my pussy. So I looked around the landfill and I found a hammer. And I put the hammer head in my pussy. Well, it wasn't very, wasn't very comfortable. And then and by the way, it was like, we don't have much in the fridge because like it's a hoarded house, but I don't know, for some reason we had hot dogs. So I thawed out a hot dog, and I found that worked a lot better because it was like softer, more malleable. In fact, I think it actually works better than most of the plastic dildos in the 80s. But so, and I discovered masturbate. Oh, so I didn't know any Muslim people growing up, right? But I did have a friend. She was actually a Muslim girl, so the only Muslim girl I ever met until I met my family in India. And her name was Sarah Sally, and she was Egyptian, and an Egyptian Muslim, and she taught me how to masturbate. And I remember her telling me, like, if she ever got pregnant, that her father would shave her head and throw her out of the house. So I sort of like kind of limited my sexual activity to mostly just like masturbation. Like I was just like, I don't know, I just thought that maybe there was bad consequences, not because I knew I was Muslim, but just, so anyway, and my fantasy, I think my first fantasy really was just like this, like longing, you know. It was this fantasy that my father wanted me. Then it was the fantasy that this hot hammerhead and this hot dog was this like love, you know. It was just like love and caring, you know. So when I was 10 years old, I moved out of my house and I moved in with a female heroin addict. And that's where I discovered like pornography, and I loved porn. I mean, first of all, I was very sexualized. So I would ride the bus home from school. I would sit in the back of the bus. I would feel the generator, and I would like multiple orgasm in the back of the bus. And then I would go to the bathroom, and this was like nobody was home. And I would lock the door, put my legs up, you know, in the shower, and I would let the water run on my clit, and I would just have like, I would masturbate to the point that I was numb. And I would pull out all the VHS cassettes because it was back in the 80s, you know, and I would put them back very carefully. She had like a lot of dildos. I was kind of like a strange kid, and I would hide. I loved these syrupy cans of mandarin oranges, and I would hide them under her couch. I mean, she's on heroin. It's not like she wants like to steal my food. She wants heroin. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't know. I just hide them all over the house. It was almost like this like Holocaust mentality of like scarcity. Like I just like we're gonna run out of food or something. And I would just, I would just like mainline porn and mainline mandarin orange syrup. And that was my childhood pretty much. I was kind of a magnet for perverts. I remember when I was in England once, I was like riding my bike, and we lived in this beautiful area. It was called Grantchester, and we went to this school that was like, you know, everyone was evaluated for their personality. Like there was no grading system, you know. And I remember riding my bicycle, and I heard this, pss, pss, you know, from the side, and I looked, and it's like this, and I'm like, ah! And like it was like, you know, in the Wizard of Oz or whatever, when they like, you know, they're like, she's like, you know, like driving away or whatever from the Wicked Witch or something like that. I don't know. I didn't grow up with TV or movies, so I don't know the reference, but there was something like that. And And I remember the neighbor, yeah, it just, and then it happened again, like once in a movie theater, I was sitting down and I was eating my popcorn and I heard the pss, pss, and I was like, oh God, and something made me look, and I knew I shouldn't have looked because I knew that pss, because it happened before. Actually, it happened when I was eating mandarins. So I went from the mandarin syrup to the real mandarins, and I would go down with $1 and I'd buy 8 mandarins for $1, and I'd peel them and I'd eat them all before I got home because I didn't want anyone to take my food. And I was peeling them one day, and this guy went psst, and he flashed me, and I was like, ah! And I dropped my mandarins, and I was so pissed because just saw my mandarins like rolling around, and you know, dollars weren't easy to come by back then, you know. But how am I doing on time? Can you hold that? 6:03. Oh no, but hold it. Can you hold it so I can see a running time? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's 6:03. Yeah. I don't know. I don't understand
22
language.
minutes.
Huh?
22 minutes.
I'm in 22 minutes in? Okay, thanks. So, gosh, summing up my life in 22 minutes. Well, it's not really all my life, but so some of the things that I guess I would want to share, if I was to say, you know, I guess the net of this, right, is like all this porn stuff, you know, it really was like this strong fantasy life. You know, I didn't like to live in reality. And reality was very painful for me. But in fantasy, I don't know, it was just, I just love living a fantasy life, you know, but unfortunately, it was just sort of like misdirected. You know, I didn't, so I always wanted to be, my whole life, I wanted to be I wanted to be on a stage, you know. And so I auditioned for the High School Performing Arts in New York, and I really wanted the drama department more than I wanted air. I wanted it so badly. But I was so awkward and uncomfortable. And I remember the day that I went in for the auditions, they said, okay, we're gonna have you be an animal, okay? Whenever you're ready. So I'm a Capricorn and I'm a perfectionist, you know. Oh, let me backtrack. So I think part of the reason I always would be on stage was because my mother went to 13 plays a week. The only people she ever made eye contact with were people who weren't making eye contact back at her, right? And all I wanted was her attention, you know? I just wanted her to see me. I wanted her to hear me. I felt so invisible. And I was jealous of the people on the stage. I used to say to her, I hope all the theaters burn down. She'd say, don't say that. Like, it was the worst thing you could say. I thought that our religion was Shakespeare, because I asked her one time, what are we? And she said, like, well, we're Shakespearean. And I went to the school and I told people that when they asked me, like, what are you? What religion are you? And I was like, oh, Shakespearean. And they were like, no, you can't be, you have to be Jewish or Catholic. And so there was only 2 choices, only 2 on the drop-down menu. So God forbid I threw out Muslim, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, but, because they weren't ready for that. They, you know, the only people that they knew, maybe in some parts, like Hindu might have been an option, you know? So where was I? Joe, where was I? Where was I?
Religion?
At the what?
Religion?
Religion. One more back. Oh, the audition. The audition?
Yes.
Okay. So I was at the audition, and nerves, you know, so nervous and wanted it so badly, you know. I was like, and I was such a perfectionist, and I was like, oh my God, okay, how am I going to be like this animal? Like, okay, I can't, like, how can I transform my body into this perfect animal? Like, it has to be like an exact rendition. Okay, I guess the only thing I can do is be a snake. So I was like, I tried to like go down on the floor, and I was like, you know, I was trying to slither, you know. But I was like watching you watch me. I was like the self-conscious snake. Okay, so I was like, so I didn't get it. And I let that mean that I am certified untalented. And guess who got it? The little brother. The little brother who got to sit on my mother's lap, and my mother had this fun game. She would pet my brother in front of me and tell me how much he was her favorite and how much I wasn't. Literally, like, I know every kid thinks that the other sibling's like the favorite. Like, my mom like made it really clear, so just in case I was, you know, was any ambiguity. So she would say, Rory Kevin, you're my favorite. Rory Kevin, you're my favorite. Let's see, let's do it in front of Siobhan so she can like watch and like, you know, whatever. But we won't let her sit on the lap, okay? So anyway, so Rory Kevin got all the fucking attention, and Rory Kevin fucking got into the drama department. So I tried to take him out. I tried to kill him when I was younger, actually. I tried to dunk him, but my mom always like brings that up too. She's like, you know, you tried to kill him. Every time we're close, we're having like a family thing. She's like, you know, she tried to kill you. Like, because I did. I fucking held him underwater. Why wouldn't I take him out? That was such a logical thing to do. I mean, it's like he had to go, you know? That's the only way I was gonna get a fucking hug. So anyway, now Rory Kevin, you know, he's like too old to kill him, you know, like and get away with it, because we're like a year apart. So we got old or whatever, and I just got super jealous. But I squashed that down because I can't be jealous of my brother, you know? So, and I loved him. I mean, I loved my brother. Anyway, so he went to the High School of Performing Arts, and he went off, became a famous actor. So I was walking down the street one day, and I was hanging out, and Bette Midler was there, and they got a kick out of me or whatever, and they put me in this movie, the First Wives Club, and I got my Screen Actors Guild card, and you know, it was just an extra. It was like, you know, I was dancing. He said like, hey, can you do some swing dancing? And I was like, yeah, like I could totally swing dance. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but I acted my way through and I did it. And they cut the scene out, of course. But anyway, I got my SAG card. And then my older brother shot at a car with 4 people in it. And my mother said, oh, isn't it terrible? He was just defending himself. He's chasing them, okay? I was like, Mommy, even if you learn law from Law and Order and you don't go to law school, like you can't be chasing them with a gun, open fire in the back of their car and say it's self-defense. Okay, guess who's the crazy one in the fucking family though? I am. You know why? Because I was locked up on 2 5150 holds. So a 5150 hold, in case you're not familiar, a lot of New Yorkers aren't, because you have to be so batshit crazy in New York to be on a 5150. Like you'd have to, okay, so 5150 is a code that basically it gives the state the right to hold you and deem you legally and incompetent so they can evaluate your sanity. And it's a mandatory 72-hour hold. They pluck you out of their life. They can just decide that you have manic energy, and they can just hold you. People don't know this, and it happened to me twice. So one time I was on my way to go, so on my birthday, this is all verifiable on the internet, January 4th, 2013, I was invited to hear Jane Goodall. Well, I've always wanted to be close to my father. I know she did some work in Tanzania with the chimpanzees, and I thought maybe she knows my dad. Like maybe there's somehow she can kind of slip a good word in for me or something like that. So I went to go hear her speak, and I was really blown away. She's a really lovely woman. In fact, there's a great documentary about her called Jane that's coming out. I went to the premiere in LA, and it's amazing, and I highly recommend it. It's the most beautiful documentary I've ever seen. Anyway, so someone invited me to go see her, and I talked to everyone. I talked to the janitors, you know, I'm a chatty person, you know, if you haven't noticed. So there was this janitor there. He was a janitor-looking kind of guy, and I was talking to him, and I said, hey, you know, and he's like, oh, you have a good time tonight? Oh, God, it's amazing. Like, the only thing that would beat this is, like, whale watching with her. He's like, actually, we're going Sunday. You want to go? I was like, are you kidding me? Like, yes. So he's like, okay, don't tell anyone. We're going on this public boat. And we leave Sunday at like 10. So make sure you're there early. And yeah, and we'll just see you there. So I'm driving. Of course, I don't leave enough time. I leave enough time for every light to be green, you know, like not for the red lights, not for the traffic. So I was speeding in my Audi, and I sailed into it started raining, and I sailed into the exit ramp. How am I doing on time?
30 minutes.
30 minutes in?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I sailed into the exit ramp, and my car was super fucked up. Like my door was like all fucking bent in, like, you know, it was but I'm from New York, you know, I was raped at 5. I had my, you know, when I told my mom, she like fucking slapped me across the face and was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do about it now, you bitch? You know, so it was just like, I'd been used to some trauma shit, you know, like I could deal with, you know, fucking car accidents, nothing, it's cake, you know? So I just I was able to open the door, so I got out, you know? My mother always says there's no such thing as self-defense. Whoops, Freudian slip. My mother always says that there's no such thing as common sense, right? And and I have to agree. You know, I didn't know what you do in an accident. I had no idea. I'm from New York. I'm used to hailing a cab. Never driven a car. I didn't know what you do. I thought you just get out and someone deals with it. So that's what I did. And I was in a hurry and I had to go. And so I was walking. I got out of the car and I was probably a little bit shell shocked from the trauma of it all. You know, because I learned this, that actually there's a lot of people who say, oh, I didn't have a traumatic past, you know. Anything can be trauma. Like you could bang your head, you know, accidentally and hit the cupboard, you know, like one of those, and that's trauma. It's like a little T, but maybe it's still. So I got out, and you're talking to someone who was in the Gulf War, okay, had missiles flying across. I was in the building in 9/11. I mean, you know, you name it, I've been there. You know, I've had wheels come off an airplane, so this was like no big deal. You know, my car's fucked up. I probably fucked up my back, but I don't feel it yet. But I gotta go. I want to get. I'm like a goal-oriented person. Like, let me just get. I gotta catch that boat. You know. So I'm walking, and I'm like, I get out of the car, like, and this is serious. Like, I mean, this was like, you know, you wouldn't see someone get out like I did, but I was just like, oh, okay, you know. And I was like, hey, do you know where you can get a cab around here? Do you know where you can get a cab? Excuse me. Do you know where you can get a cab? Oh, and then this ET guy comes over and he's like, ma'am, why don't you sit down? And I was like, no, I don't have time. I gotta go. I'm going whale watching. And he's like, okay. Who are you going whale watching with? And I said, oh, the new Nobel Peace Prize winner. Oh, she's waiting for me. The boat's gonna leave now. Okay, so he's like, do you have any family around here? And I said, oh yeah, but my brother's famous. He's not gonna come. He's you know. So he's like, why don't you sit down? And he's like, you know, a lot of times in accidents, people, they don't feel the accident yet, so you could have some repercussions. I think you should look at your back. And he's like, I really think this is more important than the whale watching. I think we should look at your back. So I sat down, and I got strapped in. I got put on a gurney. I got transported to an ER. It was like an ER in Santa Barbara College Hospital. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I mean, this was like crazy. I said, I don't want to go. I was ignored. Core trauma from father. I arrived. A tech person finally like released me from bondage, right? I mean, I was still bound, but like released, I don't know, I think it was like released maybe it was like I got my hand out or something. I don't remember. Somehow I was able to dial my phone. So I'm an attorney. I'm a licensed attorney, right? In good standing in New York. You can look me up. My stripper name is Siobhan Rhodes. My real name, birth name is Siobhan Cochrane, and the Screen Actors Guild is Siobhan Cochrane, but I changed my name because of like a whole host of things, whatever. I didn't want to embarrass my family. I didn't want to carry my father's last name. I felt like, fuck him. All right, you don't recognize me as a fucking Cochrane? Well, fuck you. Keep your fucking name. I'll just pick a random name of some girl I lived with in high school, you know? So that's what I did. I changed. So Siobhan became Siobhan for a lot of reason that we don't have time for, or we have time for, but I don't want to get there. I don't want to use the time to do that. But so here I am, and I try to call I'm like, all right, I got to call a fucking attorney. Well, I don't know any attorneys. I'm in Santa Barbara. So I remember this commercial, and it said, if you ever get busted, drinking and driving, call 1-800-NO-CUFFS. That's 1-800-NO-CUFFS. So I was like, I remember that. I'll call 1-800-NO-CUFFS. So I called up, because I was in fucking cuffs, right? So I call up them, and I speak to this guy, Brandon, similar to my older brother, Brendan, the ex-con. And I'm like, hi, Brandon. I don't know what the fuck's going on here, but I'm like these people have transported me into what feels like a mental ward or something. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I'm in the hospital. It's not. I said, am I in a mental ward? What is going? I don't understand. What is happening here? This doesn't feel like a regular ER or something. It doesn't feel like this is a hospital that you're taking care of my back. It doesn't seem like I'm really here to have my back looked at. It feels like there's something else going on. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Blah, blah. And they were like, they grabbed the phone. Because I'm a child, I'm now deemed, I can't make phone calls without someone being deemed appointed for me, for my care, so I have to have a competency hearing in a mental institution after they drug you. So how am I gonna stand trial? How am I gonna do my trial, ready? Like this. So luckily, I had some stripper moves in my back pocket, and there was a fat male nurse. So look, when you work in a strip club and the music plays, you've got one song to know who is going to be your next ATM machine, okay? So I knew I can look at a guy and I can tell you what he's into, what he jerks off to, how he likes to fuck his wife or his hooker or whatever, or himself, or whatever he's into, I can tell. I don't know. So I knew this guy, I knew his thing, and I seduced him into giving me my phone. I put my phone down my pants. I pretended to take a shit because you couldn't there were two guards that would come into the place to basically take it. Now I forgot to tell you that there's this thing called HIPAA. So HIPAA is a privacy law that basically to protect my privacy, they can't tell anyone that I'm there. So I'm off the grid. And as an attorney, I know I realize the legal ramifications because it's ignorance is bliss, but I had a lot of knowledge and I was like, oh my God, this is fucking terrifying. I literally saw my life flash between my, I saw myself locked, drugged forever, in a straitjacket, just drooling in some padded room. It was the scariest thing. So I wrote a fucking crazy ass email because I had about 20 seconds before they came in. They're knocking on the door. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I'll be right out, guys. I'm sorry that I'm not used to this food. Sorry, I'm a little constipated. I'll be out in 1 second, okay? I'll be out in 1 sec. I'm typing furiously. I'm writing, ceasing everybody in my phone. And it was an insane email. Call Obama. It was the subject was call Obama. Someone, does anyone know Obama? It was just craziness, but it was terror, complete terror. Well, you can imagine that people got this email and then the rumors flew. I always knew that she was just she's always insane. I thought she was on cocaine. Well, she was just, I think she's manic. She's, I think she's bipolar. Yeah, she's completely manic. She's just crazy. She's finally lost it, She's just, she's really gotten off the deep end now. Maybe it's a good thing that she stays there. Maybe we shouldn't pick her up. Maybe she's finally getting the treatment that she needs. And so my family left me there. They knew where I was at one point and felt like, maybe it's for the best, Because despite my brother ex-con's shooting, I'm the crazy one in the family. It's just my role. How are we doing on time?
41 minutes.
Okay, nice. So, I was going to do this character, like tonight. Well, my show is going to be very, very different. So I was going to do 6 characters, each telling a 5-minute story. And then I realized that while I have been a stripper, I've actually never really stripped down to who I really am. And what I really feel like is how many people, I always feel like who we really are is who we are when no one's watching. There's been said, like, all the world's a stage and we're merely players in it, It's like, how many people really know who I am? And, like, when I die, will anyone know? Will anyone know me? I didn't trust anyone growing up. I literally detonated relationships. I got married when I was 20 to a guy I met off an airplane. I was pregnant with a bartender's baby. I was heading home just to get an abortion when I was 19. Met my husband who didn't speak a word of English. He thought he was going to India to travel after the army. That's what they do over there. And we met. I was a bartender at the time. And I had an abortion, discarded it like with less thought than a fucking cigarette, which I used to smoke back then. And I would say that, I don't live my life with regret, but the one regret I would have if I had a regret was that I didn't have that child. Because I feel like I would have been an amazing mother. And I think that was like a painful thing because my mother always used to say, you're going to be an old spinster. You're just going to be this old, washed up spinster. You're already like so old. Because by me having a child, I would have validated her. Her culture, contextually is a place where if you're at a cocktail party and you say, how many children you have? How many? Oh, 3 daughters. No, we have no children. I'm so sorry. So sorry. It's like that's your worth. There's some others, it's just, but I said to myself, I can't change that, right? So I don't spend time like sweating it. It's just like, it's something I did and it's over and I don't, it was just a decision, it's what I did. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to create any further regret. And what I would really regret is if I lived my life without taking the risk to let one person in. So I told you guys I'm a sex addict, and perhaps you can put together the pieces of why. But there's also a lot of talk about sex addiction in the news with Harvey Weinstein, all these people who's coming out. I don't watch the news, frankly, because I get addicted to it, because I just, the obsessive thing. So I'd rather live life and watch other people document life. But it's a world that I really know, and people have, people who do know that I'm a sex addict, they say, what is sex addiction? And I say, it's like Oscar Wilde says, everything has to do with sex except sex. It's actually not about sex at all. And it's about an intimacy disorder. It's about the pain it's about the pain of being close, the fear of being close, because the pain is sure to follow. The people think the opposite of addiction is recovery. It's not. It's actually connection. And so my goal tonight was just to connect with all of you. And it was to practice intimacy with myself. And how are we doing on time?
45 minutes in.
Yeah. So I am going to say, look, there's more TBD. This is like the first time I've ever been on stage other than when I was a stripper, right? I had this, I can't even tell you, like, this is the craziest thing. I wrote, by the way, this was one improv, like, nothing's written, there's no script, there's nothing. Like, this was just me talking from my heart. But I'm gonna end it here because I want to talk to you guys and get feedback from you, and also get to know you. And so there was a promise of the Muslim porn thing. Everything went to shit. It was like, the porn will be here for the Friday show, but yeah. So what you missed was the porn thing was that I just wanted, because I don't like to do like a bait and switch and not give, give what I advertised, right? So so when I found this porn trunk, so I just wanted to wrap up with this, that my grandfather was this, dark Indian man. And he, I loved him, like I said, I loved him, and I miss him. But I just, I felt really guilty because I was embarrassed of him, and I was embarrassed of my mother, and I was embarrassed of being Indian. He put all these spicy, smelly things called chutney on everything, and he came from India, and he spoke with a very thick Indian accent, and Siobhan, he would call me Siobhan. I remember he got me a pink bicycle once and it got stolen, but anyway, and I loved him, but I just didn't feel very connected to him until I opened up his porn trunk. And when I opened up his porn trunk, I realized that I did have a deep connection with him, because he loved porn more than I did, or as much as I did. I wouldn't say more. I love porn as much as I did. And so what I was going to show you on this multimedia was what I found. There was a bunch of different stuff, and not everything can be put on a multimedia projection, but the one I was going to show you was, there was this picture of turbans. Everyone was wearing turbans and saris, and they had a big anal circle of love. They were all doing each other anal, and blowing each other. It was like a whole circle of love. And the most confusing thing wasn't that he had this. The most confusing thing was, out of one of the penises there was a cross, and I was wondering, did he want to be Muslim? Maybe he wanted to be Christian. Anyway, thank you. You can put the house lights up. So now what I want to do is I wanted to do this Q&A.